This session is going to take a slightly different form. So the last session we looked at one piece of software in particular, and we took a real deep dive into it to get those who have never sort of done much video editing before an understanding there. This session is going to look at two pieces of software, and it's going to be almost dipping our toes in the water of them. And so with this, it's slightly different because the softwares we're going to be looking at are incredibly capable. The sky is the limit, but when you first open them, it can be quite daunting, and it can almost put you off taking that step. So the idea of this session is to basically take away any of the things that might stop you getting started. Once you've got started, it is a matter of giving it a go yourself and getting stuck in. Exactly the same as last time. As I said last time, this just takes practice. We are recording the session. It will go up on YouTube. You'll be able to view it again. Exactly as the same as the Microsoft one, which is on the Children and Youth Work YouTube channel. I would recommend making notes as you go. It will hopefully give you an idea if you watch back, where to look and things to make your life easier. If you think of this in terms of, the best way I can describe this is like a bit of a ladder. We climb to the top of the last ladder, but this ladder's a bit higher, and we're starting on the first rung of it, and we're going up from there. So this is by no means all parts of the two pieces of software we're going to look at. There will be lots for you to look at afterwards, but hopefully it will get you started on them, and it will really help you take your video editing as far as you want it to go. One of the things to be aware of is these softwares do require greater computing power. You'll need to download them anyway, but we'll go through those when we get started on the individual pieces of software. But be aware that it does require more of your laptop and computer. So just being aware of that as something that may be taken into account, perhaps using some of the money from the grants. And the other thing being, a very small note, I highly recommend when doing this kind of video editing using a mouse rather than a trackpad on a laptop. It just frees up your hands and makes it a little bit easier, I find. Small note, but nevertheless, we're going to get started on the first piece of software. So the first one we're going to look at is Davinci Resolve. So what this is a software from a company called Blackmagic Design. They make all sorts of video products across many different areas, from filming, recording, playback, and then all stages of it. They are a really high level company, and what they do is they create this software as a free software that you can then upgrade if you need. In the context we're talking about it, we don't need it to be upgraded. If you're doing any sort of 3D rendering, then you would need the upgraded software, but in this context we won't. But given its capabilities, it's quite daunting when you first go on it. So there's a few things we're going to work through, basically setting up a project, getting footage in it, editing it a little bit, playing around, making you aware of the features that it has ahead of previous ones we've looked at, and making a video at the end of it. And then we're going to do the same again on a different piece of software called Adobe Premiere Pro. So this is the first thing you do when you open up Davinci Resolve. Let's say you've already downloaded it. If I could ask Dan to just put in the link to, brilliant, there you go. So that's the link where you can download this piece of software. I think it's like a 2 GB file, so it might take a bit of time, and it might take a bit of time the first time you open it up. So just be patient with it. But once you've opened it up, you can all hopefully see my screen, and you can see that I've got an untitled project and a testing one. But we're going to do a new project, one that we haven't worked on before. And so we're going to call this testing 2, for example. So I've opened a new workspace, and it's jumped up at me like this. You'll see I've got various screens in front of me. At the bottom, I've got 7 different sections that I can choose from, and I've got lots of different options at the top. So the first thing we're going to do before we do anything else is we need to set our project up for what we need it to do, because if we just go in straight away, we could hit some issues. So last time when we worked on a piece of software and we told it, at the end of it, we told it high, medium or low quality. On softwares like this, we have to we have to know a few more of the details basically in this context. So if we go to File and then into Project Settings, again, it's another pop-up menu with lots and lots of different options. But one of the things that's good about this software is a lot of them are designed that if you're just doing the starting and then going up, you don't need to touch a lot of these. So we'll start with the main ones. Resolution, you've got lots of different options, but the main one, so if you're doing full HD, as it's known, which is 1080p or 1080, we use 1920 by 1080 processing. Pixel aspect ratio is just square. That is just how it is. So that basically means each pixel is square shaped rather than wide, like a rather wide than like a cinema scope. But in this context, we have 1920 by 1080 square. Timeline frame rate, it depends on what you're feeding into it. Most phones will record in 30 frames per second. Some cameras record in, or most cameras will record in either 25 or 30. And then, of course, you can go to 50 or 60. In this context, I normally work to 25. It's entirely up to you, but match it to what you're filming. iPhones, for example, as a default, do 30 frames per second. So that's a good starting point. And make sure that your playback frame rate matches exactly there. So make sure that they match. Otherwise, the footage you're putting in will play at a different speed to what you want it to. And video monitoring just underneath it. Most of these settings you won't need to change for the getting started on these things. But one that's quite useful to check is making sure it matches. Again, you've got lots and lots of options. So 2160 is we have 4K. That's another way of describing it. In this context, we want HD 1080p 25. Again, lots of things on the left-hand side that you can get your teeth stuck into at a later date, but most of them you can leave as they are. But the one to change is in capture and playback. You want this, again, to match what you're doing the rest of the time. So HD 1080p 25, exactly as the same we had it in our master settings. So now we've got that set up, we can get started on our media. I'm going to use some bits of footage that I happen to have from a previous video I've created. Can you all give me a thumbs up? You can see those files on your screen. Brilliant. So what you can see is these were all different segments I filmed for a live streaming video. And so what we're going to do is literally what you can do here is you can drag them into the media pool. And then you'll get something that says change product frame rate. What this means is that the frame rate on my video that I'm inserting is different to what we've just set it up to. Now, in this context, it will ask you, do you want to change it or not change it? We don't want this to change because we've set it up how we want it. And I can just see Ruben's question. By not changing it when we insert it, it puts all of them to a standard frame rate. So if you've got things that are in 30, things that are in 25, things that are in 50, it converts them all to match what you've said in your timeline. So I've added that media pool. So this is my what I've called A10 intro, and then we've got that there as well. So that's the audio for the A10 intro. So I've put these into my media pool by dragging and dropping, but you can also use the media tab down here at the bottom. So these are all the hard drives on my computer. It takes a bit of getting used to find them. So this is something that is often worth having a look at individually. I just like dragging and drop, but in this context, I've clicked on where I know my documents are. And when I click in documents, I've got all my folders. But most of the time you can just drag and drop. If we then start looking at the bottom, just before I carry on, I have just remembered one thing. If you're getting into this bit and you're going, oh my days, this is a lot, and it's a bit daunting and you're not sure, don't worry. First of all, I promise it gets easier from here, but also I'm entirely not offended if you feel that this session's not for you. I'm not going to be offended at all if you feel that this is the session that is, a bit further than you were expecting. So please don't sit there and be polite. Don't worry. However, it does get easier from here. So what we're going to do is we're into the cut section at the bottom. I'm going to drag my picture in and it's going to create me an image like that. So what you'll see is a horrible side profile of my face. But what we have here is we've got our you can see the image at the top and its video down below. Now here you can just cut as you need, he says. So if I wanted to slice it along, he says like that. So all I do there is just click on the top bit and drag, and it moves across, and then there's a cut button here, and I can just split it in half. Now, this is not the only place that you can do this, so don't worry, but this is just literally what this tab is for. This tab is for getting your files together and cutting them as you need. Now, if you ever do something wrong, Control and Z is your friend, or Command and Z if you're on a Mac. That's the undo button. I use it more than any other keyboard shortcut. So always have my left hand hovering over that. But the main space that I work in when I'm using this software is the edit section. So you'll see it looks slightly different now, and a few things have changed. And what we've got is we've got our video and our audio separated out. So in this context, so I'm just going to quickly play a little bit of it through. So now that we've had a look at OBS, we're now also going to look at a really... So as you can see, it's a bit of me talking about a piece of software called Open Broadcaster software, but I've got my video here and my audio here. Now these are connected, so when I click on one, it clicks on both of them, see it both lights them both up in orange. That means those two clips are connected. My apologies. But what I've got is I recorded the audio separately. So what I want to do is just drag that in just there. Exactly, drag it from the media pool, drag it straight in. The reason you would record audio and video separately is to ensure maximum clarity of audio, basically. So I'm using a different microphone rather than the built-in one on my camera. And that's why you see people with those boards on film sets go like that. And that's to sync the audio and the video. If you're doing something like, if you're doing a proper video production, it's generally a good idea to do a separate audio take, and you can just clap and it makes it all obvious where it is. In this context, what I do realize is I've just loaded in the wrong clips. So if I click Control A, it just selects all the clips, and I click delete and it's got rid of them, and I'll put in the correct clips. And that will hopefully illustrate the point I was going to make. So just bear with me. So this is my introduction, and then I've got my audio introduction here. So the reason I wanted to show these ones is because you can see just here, thank you, Tam. Yes, you can just click on them and just click the delete button on your computer. But as you can see here, this is where I clap, exactly like that. And the reason I wanted to show this is you can see there's a peak. It's much smaller on the second one. Let's see if I can zoom in. So if you want to zoom in on something, so you want to make these bars bigger, you hold down Shift and use your scroll wheel on a computer, which is why I generally advise having a mouse. And then if you want to scroll along, you click Control and use the scroll wheel. And then if you want to zoom out and see the whole picture, you hold Alt and the scroll wheel. So those are just a few shortcuts I'll be using as I go. So just be aware with those. So as you can see these, so we'll focus first on the audio. You can see that the little waveforms here, this one, the top one, which is from my video, is louder than the one I recorded for the audio. Now we don't want that. We want the audio we recorded specially to be louder. So there are two main ways to make your audio louder. For an individual clip, when we click on it, in the top right hand corner, you'll see it's got various options that light up depending on what it is. Because it's just an audio file, it only lights up audio. Now in this context, we want it to be louder, so you literally just slide it up. It's nice and simple, and you'll see the waveform. If you watch the bottom as I slide it up and down, you'll see that it gets bigger and smaller as I go. So let's say, we put this at, you can also double click on it and just type in. That's the other bit you can do if you have a specific number. But on this case, I've just put 24, and I want this one to be a bit quieter, so I just drag this down like that. However, I don't want to drag it down yet because I actually want to align it first. So this is where I would zoom in using the Alt scroll, and then I can align them like that. So now when I play it, it will only have one sound. I'm just going to turn this down a bit. That's quite loud. So hopefully we'll go to here. Well, this is the second video that I'm putting out. So there you go. It's a clearer audio, and there's not like an echo going on. So if they were misaligned, it would sound, this is going to sound a bit horrible, so do bear with. About sort of more advanced streaming. So last time, so that's, as you can hear, that was horrible. But that shows you what it sounds like if you've not got them in line. So that's just a little thing that goes to give you an idea. But let's start with our audio. We've put our audio in place. We've controlled its volume. So the next thing we can choose is its pan. Now that's its left and right. Musicians, this is a big one for you. If you want, say if you had a drum kit, you'd want it to maybe panned as the drummer sees it, or if you've got a stage layout, so you've got the keyboards on the left and the guitars on the right, you might want to image it like that. And again, you can just scroll it. So minus is left and positive numbers are right. And you can literally just grab it like that. But you can also double click and type in the number you need. You've then got pitch correction, which makes the pitch of it higher or lower. Don't normally touch that in most contexts. So I generally just turn it off. Also, these orange buttons here are to turn it on and off. So for example, if you watch at the bottom where the audio is, if I turn the volume off, it takes all that extra volume I've put in it away. So you can just turn that back on. We'll turn the pan off in this context. And then we get to our equalizer or EQ. A few little things that you can do to make your life easier. There's basically a bottom band. It's either called a low cut or a high pass. If you've just got spoken word, I generally say put it about 100 hertz. It's sort of the general, cuts out any background noise. That will, hopefully it will basically if you've got any aircon or anything or any buzz in the background, it will get rid of it. And you, as it does here, cut off about 10 kilohertz. That gets rid of all the air at the top of the human voice. So this is for human voice. I'd set this up, and then if you wanted to, you can play around with it. This is something that, there's lots of videos online about. There's a YouTube channel called Attaway Audio. If you do any live music, they're really good for getting you into that kind of stuff, but we're not going to look at that tonight. So this is basically if you were having a voice, you just want a basic EQ on it. So that is our audio channel set up, and you'll see on the, I changed my mind, we're going to come back to that. What we've got first is the video. So when I've now clicked on the video, I've now got two options. You'll see at the top, rather than having just one box open, I've got two. The file is literally just the name of the file when it was created. So that's just information that you might need to check, but not something you'd normally go to. What you have here are all of your options for video. So transform is just the movement of it. So if I wanted to zoom in, oh no, we'll zoom out instead. That's a better idea. And then you can move it. It's X axis, so across, and it's Y axis down. We can rotate it all around. An anchor point is where the rotation anchors from. So moving that across moves where it rotates. It's weirdly entertaining, this, for me, anyway. You've then got its pitch, which is sort of in the Z axis. And then you've got its yaw, which is almost pivots, turning round, basically. So that, I'm just gonna have to reset all of this now, aren't I? I should have thought this through. He says I got rid of the image. So yes, so let's do this.
You could press the reset button on the right, couldn't you?
You could. I'm glad you pointed that out, because it was my next point, but thank you. Thanks, Dan. As Dan said, you can just click the reset button, but thanks. You've also then got the flip, literally horizontally or vertically. The reason, slightly different reason, I wasn't going to mention it yet. If you've got, what you can do is if I set the zoom at 50%, I can then click these diamonds here. Now, the reason these diamonds are here are basically timeline points that you change things from. So if I click it there and then drag along, click it again and change the zoom to 0.25, across that time between those 2 points, it will go from 0.5 to 0.25 zoom. So you'll see, with any luck, I start zooming out. And then it will sit there as it is. So in order to change between the points, you just click the arrows that are next to them. And then if I drag along, I'll make a third one. So by changing the zoom, it's then made a third point. So you'll see, I'll just go back. So you see I've dragged it along. There's no orange in the diamond there, and now there is. So I've now got 3 points that I can choose from, and you'll see it zoom.
Hello,
back
everyone.
You can do that for any of the parts that have the diamonds, but if I click reset like that, it removes all of those points. So that's why in that context, just be aware, if you use that button, it removes all of the points you've used. So sometimes it is just best to manually do it, but it does depend on what you're using it for. So with all of this, again, just takes a bit of time, depends on what you're doing. But if you've got a 1080p video, it will fill this screen without you having to zoom it. So if I just zoom out, that's a small, that black box that we've got is the screen we're filling. So having it at 1 is because that was filmed at that resolution, it sits there like that. So that's your transform section. Your cropping section is, you know, like an image. You crop it as you need it, and then you can soften it up, make it look, it's like a portrait, doesn't it? And so you can just reset it like that if you need. Again, these are things that you can adjust as you go. So if I change that, you'll see it opens up as we go.
Hello, everyone.
These are all things that you can play around with as you go. A lot of these things I don't normally play with anyway. They're just different, basically, video modes and effects that you can do, stabilization, lens correction, all that kind of thing. You'll notice that speed change just here is actually slightly blurred out. It just means you can't turn it off immediately. There are 2 ways to change the speed. If you want to speed something up, you can use this scroll wheel, and you'll see it. This makes me talk very quickly. Let's just.
And all things Facebook Live. So what we're going to do here is we're going to.
So there you go. And you can just reset that. And then you can also slow it down, which sounds, again, horrible. But anyway, so that's another thing you can do. But if you want to do it there's another way to do it is if you just right click, you can then change the speed, just change clip speed. So it's up to you on how you want to, it's all about getting a workflow that works for you. I'd personally just do it by right clicking, but it's also there if you need it. You've also then got options on your audio as well, because this has got audio in the video. You can then change it exactly as we could the last one, and you can put the EQ on it as we spoke about before. A couple of little bits I've been doing as we're going. You've got 2 buttons here that will make your life easier if you're listening to specific tracks. The solo button, so I'll only hear the audio there, or I can just mute it altogether. So 2 little things that make your life easier. You can also lock it so you can't make any more changes. And then if I double click like this, you'll see it just comes to the audio track. We'll come to that a little bit later, but if you're ever stuck, you can just click on, let's do this. And then if I just click on the video, it goes back to what I was looking at. One of the things we found last time that was a bit of a pain was we couldn't, we also had text that we would be looking to use, and we couldn't necessarily change what we were wanting to do with it. So if I wanted to add a title, I can click on titles on the left-hand side, and I've got a number of different pre-builts I can use, but the difference is all of these are customizable. So if I drag a text, and by putting it in the layer above, so I'll just zoom out this a little bit. So if I drag it over the top of this text, it creates a new layer. So unlike before, where sometimes you'd have to have one or the other, you can create multiple layers on top of each other. Think of it like a cake. The top layer is the one that you see at the top, literally. So it would be like putting 2 pieces of paper on top of each other. So if you put 2 videos on top of each other, if they were the same size, the one that's higher up in your layers is the one you'll see. So just there's one thing to be aware of. So what I can do is if I click on this title card, you'll see I get some more settings up here. I've got the font, I've got the color, I've got the size, tracking, which is the gap between the letters, the line spacing, which is if I had some more things there, you can then obviously change how far apart they are. The font case, so you can literally do all caps, all that kind of stuff. Alignment is one that's, the alignment and anchor is quite useful. Obviously, if you're doing text from the middle rather than from the edges, that is something that when writing out lyrics or something like that, it will make your life easier. Let's just write testing. And then when I play around with the font, that's the URC font. So you can take that, I can change its color to whatever color I'd like. Let's go with a lovely, let's go with a blue, shall we? It's like I don't know what you'd call that. Anyway, you've then also got its position. You can change its position exactly as before, its size and its rotation. Again, all of these things can be reset, and you've got the sort of timeline points exactly as before. So if you wanted your text to move, so if we start it there, and then by the end of it, I want it to be over here, it would still do that. So you'll see it's moving across the screen as we're going. So again, you can reset all of this. And there's a few more, so that's sort of the first bit. That's the text itself. Now we want that text to be more presentable. So if you want a shadow, you can create that shadow by just changing the offset values, literally just drag. The blur is basically how sharp it is. I'm just going to make it a bit bigger so we can see that a bit better. There you go. So if we if we take the blur, if we make it very blurry, sort of see there, and its opacity is obviously its sort of thickness almost is how transparent it is, and so you can play around with it there. Again, all of these things can be reset. If you want to reset all the drop shadow settings, is at the top. Sorry, I've been doing this. My apologies. If you've got a full section, so on the settings you've got stroke, background, drop shadow. If you want to change all of those settings rather than just say the offset or the blur, you can just click the refresh at the top. So we've done that. The stroke is basically its outline. So if I wanted it to be slightly thick like that, again, all of these things you can change the color of. That's going to look horrible. Try that one. It's just having a moment. And its background is literally just background to the text. Let's see if I can get it to work. He says, there we go. So something like that, basically. If you're doing, if you're doing closed captioning, it can be useful to have that on the background, quite transparent, but it gives the background something there. So that's your text. And you can literally, the other thing you can do with this is, once I've done that, I can just drag it all around. So if I literally just click on the open space, as we did before, and you'll see it automatically snaps to the middle. But so you can just play around with that. And that's the default, so you wouldn't need to change any settings to get it to do that. So that's our, basic setup there. We've then got a few bits in here that will make your life easier. The cut tool, the razor tool. So I want to cut off the front bit. And what you'll see here is I've got the magnet on. That basically means that it automatically snaps. So if you see as I move it along, when I hit that orange line, it snaps into place. That's what that does. And it also means that if I wanted to just cut this, so if I've got the orange line there and I want to cut it to it, you'll see this thinner orange line will just disappear. And when it's there, I've got that set. And I want to cut all of it to that place. And then I want to get rid of it. So I've cut those, and you'll see if we move this along, you'll see that it now has two separate sections for this. So I want to get rid of these three, so I can just click on the empty space, drag, and click delete. And automatically it snaps everything to the front of the timeline. So that should hopefully show you how to cut that exactly as before. And you've then got the options to put some transitions in. So at the minute, when the text comes on, or any of it, it just
this is the second
appears on screen. We don't want it to do that. We want it to look a bit smoother. So one of your first ones to use is a cross dissolve. All you do is you drag it from here onto the clip you want it to, and you'll see that it is literally like this. You'll see it goes from nothing.
Hello, everyone.
And fades in nicely. Same for the text. We want it to do exactly the same.
Doing well. This is the second.
And you'll see it does exactly that. And then when I want it to dissolve out, I do exactly the same.
Streaming. So last time
you can then do it across two clips. So if I just cut this clip here, what we'll do is we'll take a dip to color, and I just drag it to the middle. And then when I've clicked, so we've dragged it to the middle, and you'll see it hovers across the two clips. And then when I click on the transition itself, in the top right, this is where my settings for the transition are. It can be longer, it can be shorter. You can align it where you want it to be. So if you want it to go to the back of the last clip, the middle of the two, or the front of the new one, it does it like that, and you can choose what color. So if we then press
All
play,
things Facebook Live.
it fades away and fades back in. So that's sort of how to do that basic transition, and all of these video transitions are here. You've got lots and lots to play with built in. These are all things to just have a play with as you go. The cross dissolve and dip to color dissolve are sort of the main go ones. You've then got barn doors, pushes, wipes, all that kind of thing. This is kind of thing that would take some time to play around with. The audio transitions, similar kind of way. You've got your crossfade like this.
And all things Facebook Live.
So the 0 dB, there's nothing. As you can imagine, the -3 dB, and then I click on it here, it should.
And all things.
It's at this point I realise I've put it on the wrong one. Let's do this.
And all things Facebook Live.
And you can hear it dip and then come back up. So you can put those at the end, you can put them in between clips, you know, it tidies it all up. This is something we couldn't do before. And then, so we then go, the other thing to just quickly show you that, just so you've got a peace of mind. So last time when we were doing these, we looked at using images. It works in a very similar kind of way. I'm just going to get those images up. Bear with me. So if I've got an image, I've just dragged it in exactly as before, and I bring my cursor to here. You'll see that this image fits the screen as I need it to. I can do all the same things I could do before. I can make it smaller, I can make it bigger, I can play around with it exactly as I did before. I can drag it like this, make it longer, make it last for more time, make it last for less time. And with this one, we can then, there's lots of mute audio going on in the background, which I'm going to mute. And then if I wanted it to transition across so it's slightly smoother as it comes in, it's exactly like that. So this is very similar to what we did when we did the Microsoft Video Editor session. You literally drag it in place, and then you can just control the time by dragging it, he says, and it not there you go. So again, just click and delete and it will go away. So I've now got this in place. That's gone there. And I've got some bits and bobs in there. We've then got our titles, which is you can use a subtitle, so just drag them in like that and then edit them. And again, with all of this, you can copy and paste exactly like that. But be aware, it will copy to where this line is. So if this line, like just then, was across a couple of minutes ago, it will copy to there. But Control-C, Control-V, or Command-C, Command-V, and you can also right-click as you need. Your generators are basically the sort of the holding screens you see when things go wrong, but they have their uses in different applications, not necessarily something you use all the time. And then we go to our effects. Some of these, as you'll literally just see right now, is Davinci Resolve versus Davinci Studio. So I spoke earlier about how you could upgrade. There are different reasons, you know, there are lots of reasons that you would upgrade. It's $300 US. In the context we're using it, you wouldn't need to upgrade. You get, you know, it's more for the sort of the sort of more professional video editing with like 3D rendering, and you have to de-interlace and de-embed. So if that means anything to you, that's sort of what you're using it for. But in most contexts, don't worry. You can play with it as you go, and you'll understand what effects are. Go away. You'll understand it as it goes. So that is, in essence, a rough idea. I'm just going to get rid of the end of it, of what this editing interface is like. So I'm just going to cut off the edges. So as you'll see, I drag it and it snaps to the end. I can get rid of that bit, go back to my selection tool and delete it. So that is the editing workspace in a rough idea. But you'll notice we've got quite a few more bits at the bottom, which we'll go through, but they sort of cover less as we go. Fusion is the Blackmagic sort of effects and animation-y type. In most basic stuff, you wouldn't need to do it. Most of the stuff I use, I just use the editing space and drag things into that. But Fusion is for sort of animation, and for those of you who use the Adobe suite, it's kind of like After Effects. You've then got the color correction. You can sort of see as I do it what happens to these different bits. Not necessarily something you need to worry about all the time. That all looks horrible. But these are things you can play around with and understand. There are tutorials on this that you can have a look at and understand what it is. And then you've got Fairlight, which is the audio mixer. Again, when I'm using this software, I do most of it in here, but Fairlight is available if you've got lots and lots of channels to play with, but we don't necessarily in this context. So let's say I've got my videos here, and I'm happy with how it is for now, let's just say, and I want to make it into a video. So I then want to deliver it. You've got a few sort of options here, but generally I just use it custom as per each individual thing. I'm just going to give it a name, which I'm just going to give, he says. Technology is my friend tonight, isn't it? Let's leave it as untitled. And if we click browse, it will jump me to wherever it's storing some of my data, some of its, the bits and bobs that it stores in order to make your life easier. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the advanced section, and I'm just going to call it untitled. And it's just, all you do is literally browse to where you want it to go, downloads, pictures, videos, wherever. And call it untitled. I only want it as an individual clip. So I want basically the whole thing as one. And then when it comes to the format, I normally say an MP4 file using the H.264 codec. If you do it there are different things you can use depending on what format you use, but these are the sort of standards that you'll get wherever. The resolution wants to stay the same as what we had it before, same as frame rate. And its quality is another one of the fun settings you can deal with. Automatic will use lots and lots. It will be quite a big file size. I generally, in this context, will restrict it. The restriction of the bit rate does depend on what you're doing. It depends on what camera you've put it on. It depends on how many frames per second, lots of different factors. However, as a base rule, if I'm doing something in 1080p with 25 frames per second, I will use 12 megabits per second or 12,000 kilobits per second. It depends on what you're doing. It depends on where you're sending it. The more bits, the higher resolution, the higher quality. It depends on what you're doing. It depends if file size is a limit. There are lots of different factors to work with, but that's just a basic starting place for you to go. So I've set up all of these things as I want them to. I click add to render queue, and then it jumps over to the right hand side. And then all I do is click render all. And then what will happen is your computer will start making lots of noise as all the fans turn up, and then it will be making your video. So I will just, while that's doing that, I'm just going to look at the questions that have been going through as we're going. Apologies if my mouse is jumping all over the shot. Yeah, I'm not aware that it is on my screen, but do let me know if it's still having issues. Subtitles, how does this work with subtitles? Can you just clarify, is that in terms of inserting subtitles or generating them yourself? If you could just check that for me.
That's me
yes.
adding subtitles to a song video.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. I'll just go back to that in a second for you. And can you insert a new section of video into an existing sequence? Yes. So I'm just going to quickly show something here. So if I've then got a second video, let's just take this one, for example, I can then just drag it in straight across. But then I've also got the option. So you'll see, we'll just get rid of this for a second. So when I drag this particular video and then I drag it to layer 2 or layer 3, it drags the audio with it, and then I can drag it over the top of another one. So what you'll see, because like we said, the layers of a cake, you'll see that this will overtake the other one. So the other one's still playing, but it's been overtaken. So that basically, is that what you mean by inserting the new section of a video? Is that what you're after?
I wonder as well, AJ, if you could just expand on perhaps splitting a video, say somewhere in the middle, and inserting a new video in there.
As in, so if I were to take this bit here, I can just cut it there, take my selection tool, and then drag it over here, and then I can put something else in the middle. That's an audio file, we don't want that. like this, for example. So all you do is you can cut it, drag it across, and then I put a new one, cut the end of that off, and use your selection tool to get rid of it. So it's all literally just drag and drop, exactly as you would with files. Can you add a JPEG to the video, say in the top corner? Yes, you can. So if I had, for example, let's say I've got this bit of video and I want to put, it's going to be very loud, we're just going to mute it. If I've got this video playing here, zoom in a bit, and I want this image to come over the top, you can. So I've created it into a new layer. And then all I do, so if I take this, I want to change its position. So I want it to be in sort of the top corner. So first of all, I want to make it smaller. So like we said, layers of a cake. So I want it to be smaller. So I've changed its zoom to 0.2. And then I can change its position just by dragging these. You click on the number and drag left or right, and then it will move it there, and you can play around with its position. And then, like we said, you can also change it as you're going. So yes, you can add. You can also add a smaller video if you wanted to, on top if you needed to. You can add it's kind of one of those endless moments, but this is sort of how you do picture in picture. Is there a rule around using a new layer, or is it a video per layer? It's up to you. It's sort of on your workflow. I wouldn't necessarily create like a new layer every new video, but if I had sort of a main video, and then I wanted, it was following on from the same theme. So let's just take, all right, this is the next one in the sequence. And this was the main content, and then this was the next video in the main content. I'd just leave them on the same layer and then use my, bits on the top would be sort of my images, my text, they'd sort of go in the layer above. Generally, I have sort of, you'll see it later in a different project, one layer for any subtitles or words, one layer for transitions, one layer for images. And you'll sort of see a bit of an example of that later. You can put things in the same layer and they won't affect each other as long as they're at different times. But if you make any changes to the exact layer, so if I muted this track, it would mute all of it. Or if I lock it, it locks all of it. So just be aware of that. And if I disable it, it turns all of it off. So just be aware that it would affect the whole layer rather than the individual clip. So what we've done there, and while we've been talking, the video itself, the untitled video, has rendered itself there. You can see my image and all of that kind of stuff. So that, in a nutshell, is a very starter look at Davinci Resolve. Now, we're going to look now at Premiere Pro. Premiere Pro is the Adobe version. The thing is, with this, it's a paid software. It costs £240 for the year. So conveniently works just a little bit more than the grants that you can apply for. But it is a really good investment. It's £20 a month charged, but it's the software that I use the most, and I highly recommend it. But what we're going to do now is we're going to look at a very similar kind of thing in Premiere Pro. We've sort of covered a lot of things, but you'll sort of see a lot of similarities between the two. So I'm just going to get this up now. So just give me one moment. So hopefully you can all see this now. And so you're met with this screen when you open it up. And if we click New Project, you're going to see some similarities as we go sort of between settings you need to play around with. Again, this is not going to be a full-on, every setting. This is going to be the things you need to get going. So I've given it a name. This is going to be Untitled 1. It's in the folder that I want it to do, but I can browse for the folder I need. In this context, it will normally just say software only, but if you've got a graphics card, it will say that. I display it in frames, milliseconds. Don't need to worry about the capture format and the colors management too much most of the time. Scratch disk literally means where is it saving a lot of the stuff to. I normally just leave it in the Adobe folder, and its ingest settings are if you're recording straight into it, or ingesting, literally ingesting. So this is the setup you're met with. You're then met in the top with a similar kind of thing to Resolve, but it's at the top rather than at the bottom. Assembly is literally getting all of your media in. So in this context, there's some URC youth stuff, but you can drag and drop as you do before. Editing, literally just editing. Color management, effects, audio, graphics, captions, all that kind of stuff. I normally sit just in the effect and I drag and drop the things in that I need. So if I just drag in the introduction and I drag it into this space here, it will import the file and you'll see the workspace that we normally have. Lots of similar things we now need to do. Instead of, before we set our sequence settings and then we put stuff in, this one we put our stuff in and then we can adjust our sequence settings. You go sequence, sequence settings, nice and simple. I want to change it to 25 frames per second, 1920 by 1080 and square pixels. For those of you, this is a step up you can take if you use high dynamic range monitors or 10-bit color. You can change those stuff. But again, these are things you do once you've got started and ready to go. So I then click OK and it's changed that for me. And you'll notice just here, it's got, it's counting in frames, but I want it to be done in seconds. So I click these 3 lines here and click show audio time units, and then I can see how long everything is. Exactly the same as before, I've got my audio, which I just drag into one of these audio layers and I can adjust them. I just zoom it in by clicking on this. So basically the, I don't know what you call that, side bottom bar. Not very nice. Anyway, you would just drag that, make it smaller, and then you can just drag your individual components and you can take it down to a millisecond level and it will adjust as you need it. That's literally how you build those. You've then got your settings all live in the top left-hand corner. So if I click on that, I've got my positional ones again. So again, I can just click on the number and just drag it. Let's do this. I've got my scale. I've got my rotation. I've got all of those things we had before. Again, you can reset all of them like that. And you also still have your sort of marker points, slightly, in my opinion, slightly better notified, but you can change all of those exactly as we did before. So hopefully these concepts aren't new to you now. And you can see if I click play, it is quiet at the minute, so don't worry. It's changing as we go. So that's sort of how you'll see that play. Let's reset all of this. And when I click reset in Premiere, that's the other difference. When you click reset in Premiere using the return, it doesn't get rid of your marker points. It just resets its position. You've then got your audio levels. You click volume and you can make it louder and quieter. But there are a few things. When you make it louder using this, let's see if it will do this. So if you see, when I make it really quiet on the audio level, the little graph here hasn't changed. Don't be alarmed by that. It is changing it. It only changes when you change the clip gain, the audio gain. And then when I change, so minus 12, you'll see it's made it smaller. Lots of similar things. You've got your razor tool. Again, it snaps to it. So I've got this little magnet here. It will snap straight to where I need it to. And I can cut it up like that. And I can select all just by dragging my mouse in the gray area. Select, Control X or delete gets rid of it. The other thing to note, the difference, it doesn't snap everything to the beginning. It leaves it where it is. So you can, in the setup, with the basic sort of starting setup, so you will need to drag it across. What else we've got? So we're then going to look at our audio. Instead of having its EQ built into the top left panel, it's over here in audio effects. So these are all inbuilt. You click filter and EQ, and there are lots of parts, and it can be quite daunting. The one you want normally is the parametric EQ. Drag it on or double click, and you'll see it comes up. And when you click edit, you'll be met with something like this. Exactly as we had, similar sort of looking to how we had before, just a slightly different way of doing it. And so we've got that. You've got, for those of you audio, there's compressors, there's delay, there's reverb, there's all sorts of stuff in here. One thing that will make your life easier though is the denoise. The denoise gets rid of background hums and air cons, or if you've got, you know, like a buzz going on in the background, that is your tool, and it will make your life very, very easy. It's inbuilt into Adobe, and if nothing else, it's definitely worth it for that. So that gives you an idea there. You've then got your transitions. So instead of being on the left-hand side, they're on the right-hand side. So the audio ones apply to the audio exactly as before. You drag them straight in, and you'll see when I click on them, it says you can change its length, you can change where it sits. Again, all of this is just drag and drop. If you want to change something, all you have to do is just click on it, and it will move. You've then got your alignment. You can start it at the cut, so it goes on to the next clip. You can end it, so it's on the first clip, or you can center it so it dips out and comes back in. And then you've got your video transitions. You've got your cross dissolve, which is the sort of normal one I would normally use. So exactly as we did before. You've got dip to black, dip to white, barn doors, all of that kind of stuff. It's exactly the same as Davinci, slightly different options in a slightly different place. So that's why we sort of took a bit more time over Resolve, was because to sort of show you that all of these things are there. And now in Premiere Pro, all you've got to do is just find them in a slightly different place. You've then got your video effects, you've got color correction, you've got image control, you can green screen. All of these things will be things that you can play around with as you go. One of the things that is, again, slightly different is the cropping feature. Rather than it being inbuilt into the clip, you have to apply the crop. So it's in video effects, transform, and then you just drag it onto it, and then I can take out the sides and all sorts of stuff. Although I'm on the wrong video, but I'll go to there. There we go. So there you go. Half of it's gone. So that gives you an idea there. The other then useful bit is like we say, we're having captions or subtitles. So I normally start by doing go to the graphics tab for this. Just generally, that's where it's kept. But you can also, while here, you can just do graphics at the top, new layer, and text. So I've then got this new text layer, and you'll see it's highlighted there, but I don't have much control over it. So I open that little arrow, and you'll see I've got all of the options I've had before. I can choose its font. I can choose bold, italic, all that kind of stuff. I can choose its alignment, both vertically and horizontally. I can change the gap between the letters. You've got all of these features to play with. The stroke is the outline. So if I do that and then drag it up like that, you'll see it's got the outline. Outline is there. You've got the background, you've got the shadow, exactly as we did before. All things that you can play around with as you go. This is just me dragging and dropping at this point, but all of this should be taken with giving it a go. There is a free trial on Adobe is the other thing. So if you're unsure, you don't have to pay up front. You've got a 7-day free trial of any Adobe software. So you can try it before you go. Thank you, Dan. Very glad you're here. So you can try it before you do. So you don't necessarily have to commit to it before. You can then also change the text position, and you can change it as it goes. So if I then drag it along further, it will then move as we're going. So you'll notice there, you'll think to yourself, oh, that's a bit odd. It was jumping as I sort of pressed play. Don't worry, that is only a preview part. If you're having that issue, you can change the quality and it will basically help the frame rate. So you can do quarter quality, half quality, full quality. So don't worry about that. It won't do it when you make the final video. Again, you can rotate it, you can play around with it exactly as you could any other component. You can change its length in sort of two ways. You either right click and change its speed/duration. It's done in frames in the settings we've got it. So all it would be was the number of frames per second. So this is 25 and I wanted it for 10 seconds. I just times it by 10. But I can also just drag it like this. Exactly the same as before, as we did before. And I can add a cross dissolve on like we had earlier and add it there. It's moving around. There you go. So that, roughly is sort of where everything will be on that front. I just want to cut off the edges of this, get rid of this, stuff there, and then cut it all off. And so we've then got ourselves, we've got our text in. If I wanted to add an image in like we did before, let's show that like this. So just here. So again, it's like layers of a cake. So I want to make this, because it's overtaken everything, I want to make this smaller. I can put it side by side with the video if I wanted to, and move it like that. So, obviously neater, but you get the idea of what you can achieve. So we've then got that. One of the sort of bonuses of Premiere Pro is it also has presets that will make your life a lot easier. People make these and they're available online. Depending on what use case you have for them, they are often free to use. If you're using it commercially, they're usually about £6 or £7. However, they are absolutely fantastic. So Dan, I'm just going to ask you to chuck some of the preset links into the chat for me. But what that means is it improves the ability for me to do my transitions. So if I've got a clip here, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to this. So if I've got something that's just down here and I've just got a cross dissolve, it's there, but it does look a bit, it can look a bit plain. So in this context, I want it to look, wow, I want it to jump out at me. So I've got the presets which you download at these links. You then insert them into Premiere Pro, which I will remember to send the instructions on how to do so afterwards, because I've forgotten to give Dan the link, so I do apologize. However, you can import presets really easily. It's literally one button. And then how do I make this work? So if I drag this, nothing happens. So what I need to do is I need to go to click on this section here in the right. I click New, and I click Adjustment Layer. And by clicking Adjustment Layer, it will ask me what size I want it to be. And these are the default settings for your video. And it creates it in the bottom left corner. You drag it in, you make it as long as you want it to be. So if you see here in the top right corner, it says 20 frames for slide down. So I want it to be 20 frames. So I want that. And then I drag my preset over the top like so. And you will see in the left-hand side, it's then got my transform just there when I click on the adjustment layer, and then it will make a slightly more interesting transition. However, it's zoomed in a lot. So what do I do to get rid of that? I change the scale, and you've got a new transition you can use. You can then partner that with a slide up, or you can, there are a number of different options you can do with that. For an example of how that will look at the end is I'm just going to get up a different project, which is the stepwise video that was put together in November. So just give that a moment to load. So if we we'll go to the beginning and we'll see some of these transitions in action. So as we go here, you'll see those options you've got, the doors you've got to use in different places. These then partnered with different transitions. So you've got sort of white flashes you can have that look something like that. Or that's a zoom, for example. But if I wanted the one I'm looking for, which is over here somewhere, there you go. So like a white flash, those are the options you've got, and people have already made them for you. Just one other note before I just move on to giving you a closing video. If you're not hearing audio at the minute, don't worry. That's because in my preferences, which I've just clicked on the wrong one, if I go to Edit, Preferences, and Audio Hardware, this is where some more settings are. You can play around with these as you go, but the default ones will give you most of what you need. These are all things you can play around with when you're more comfortable as you go. But on this context, I want it to go to a specific place. So it's exactly the same as if I go to the bottom right on my audio where my volume is, and then choose which one I want it to go to. I choose it exactly the same way. I click OK.
Yeah, I think I was just feeling
And
a
now
bit
you can hear
cheesed
it.
off with.
So hopefully that makes sense. And then how do I get a video out at the end of it? I click Export, I click Media, and then I've got my output name, testing 1. And then you've got your different settings. So in your basic video settings, I generally match source, which is why we set up our sequence settings earlier. You've got your encoding settings. If you've got a dedicated GPU, you can use your hardware acceleration. And then we've got our bitrate option. So you can either do it twice or once. exactly as before. This is, instead of being in kilobits, this is in megabits. So what was 12,000 before becomes 12. Your audio settings, I generally use the AAC format. 48 kilohertz or 48,000 hertz is the standard for video, and I preference it by bit rate and then use maximum render quality. You can then either click export, which does it in Premiere Pro, but if you've got other things to do, you can click Q and it will open up the Adobe Media Encoder for you. What this does is basically it will get all the things ready to go, and when I tell it to start encoding, I can start working on it there, drag it across to a different screen, and I can carry on working on a different project. It means that it doesn't take away what I'm trying to do. So that, in a nutshell, is a very brief look at Resolve and Premiere Pro. You may think, okay, why has he gone so quickly on Premiere Pro? Hopefully, the sort of deeper look at Resolve will give you an idea as to what both of these are capable of. And the Premiere Pro was more, this is where to look for it. From a purely personal point of view, I find Premiere Pro a bit easier to use and slightly more capable, but it is entirely up to you. It's whatever you choose and whatever options you have. I'm just quickly looking. I don't think we have any further questions. Dan, are there any I've missed?
None that weren't answered, I don't think.
Brilliant. The other thing that will come with it that I think I forgot to say is the images were taken from some copyright-free image websites, which we will send out afterwards. And I think that covers everything I had planned. Thank you very much.